All right, people, we are back with another set of notes in Unit 2, so go ahead and grab that tab so that we can write down what we're working on. So this set of notes is going to go on page 20, and this one is just graphing linear functions. Graphing linear functions. So this is actually a topic that's taught in middle school because you guys use slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, and you practice graphing them. We needed to talk about slope before we can actually graph stuff because slope is part of the y equals mx plus b formula. So we're going to work on graphing linear functions. So it's going to go on page 20. This is what the notes look like, so you will need to take a minute and tape this down, fold it in half and tape it down on page 20. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, your notes should be taped down, and now we're going to go ahead and start. So we are talking about graphing linear functions. So in middle school, most middle schoolers, they are drilled with this equation day in and day out. And then when they get to me, I ask them what it is, and they're just like, oh, y equals mx plus b. So yes, this is the equation, but the equation is called slope-intercept form. So we need to make sure that we understand that this equation is slope-intercept form. So we're going to talk about the certain variables and the certain numbers that are in there. So we have our x, y. That's going to be an ordered pair at the end. It gives you the ordered pair. This m right here, we talked about it last time. M is slope. Okay, M is slope. Then we have this b value back here, and that tells us what our y-intercept is. So we have slope and y-intercept. That's actually how they got the name of this form, because if you look, it's called slope-intercept form because we have slope and an intercept. That's how they come up with the name of it. So these two numbers right here, because they're going to be numbers when you see an actual equation, they're very important to us. So down here, I'm going to try to show you all of it. I have these steps to graph an equation, so we're going to talk about these steps and do this one at the same time. Okay, so step 1. So here's our equation. Let me talk about the equation first. Our equation is y equals 1 over 3x minus 2. So 1/3 x minus 2. So this 1/3 is our slope, and then this -2 or minus 2 is our y-intercept. So now let's go up here and talk about the steps. So step 1, it says graph the blank. This is your b value. So this is y-intercept. So we're going to graph our y-intercept. This is your b value. If there is no b value in the equation, the y-intercept is blank. So here's what this means. If you see y equals 3x and then nothing back here, this is the same as writing plus 0. So if there is no b value, then that means the slope is 0. Okay? So now let's go graph our y-intercept, because down here, our y-intercept is right here. So we're going to graph a point, our y-intercept. So this is our y-axis. We're going to go to -2 on the y-axis and plot a point. So there's our y-intercept. That's where it's going to cross the y-axis. Step 2, it says use the blank, which is the m value. That's our slope. To graph more points. Remember, slope is always rise over run. So when we talk about graphing, this is where rise over run really helps us. And then it says if there is no m in the equation, the slope is. So here's what I'm talking about when I say no m. If you see something like this, there technically is not a number written in this spot where the m would go. We know that there is an imaginary 1. It's an understood 1. So that's what I'm talking about. If you don't see a number in front of that x, the slope is 1. Okay? So just be careful. If you don't see a number in front of that x, it is an understood 1. So now let's go use our slope. So here's our slope. We have 1 over 3. So that means we just graphed our y-intercept. So I plotted my little point at -2. From this dot right here, so I'm going to leave my pen or pencil on this dot, and there's my rise over run. So I'm going to rise 1. That's a positive 3, so I'm going to go to the right. So it's up 1, right 3. I'm going to plot another dot. And then from this new dot, up 1, right 3, plot another one. Now I've got some on the right. I want to grab some on the left. So I'm just going to do down 1, left 3. So it's the same thing, just the opposite direction. So there are my points. I've used the whole graph that I can. So we've graphed more points. Step 3 is to connect the points and add arrows at each end. So when it says connect, that means use a straight edge of some sort and draw you a line through those points. So I'm going to draw a line, and then I'm going to put arrows at the end of these ends. So the arrows, let me talk briefly about those. The arrows mean that this line goes on forever. If you don't have the arrows and you just have this, then that looks like a line segment. So we have to be very careful and add arrows at the end of all of them because they go on forever. And then step 4, this is for you to just check your work. It says check your work, ask yourself what would Slope Dude say. So if we, and this is what I mean by that. Since this is a positive 1 over 3, I needed to make sure that I had a positive slope. So that means Slope Dude would be skiing up this mountain, okay? That's what I mean by that. So that's how you do it. So if you ever forget the steps, they are written out right here for you. So you can always refer back to your notes and get those refreshed in your brain. So we are going to practice graphing some. I'll do one more with you, and then I'm going to let you practice on your own. So get situated. I have on the left hand, it says practice, make sure to identify slope and y-intercept. And there are 4 different graphs, and we're just going to practice graphing them. I'm going to do actually, I'm going to do 2 of them with you. I'm going to do number 2 and number 4, and then I'll have you do 1 and 3. So let's start with number 2, okay? So take a look at number 2. Zoom in a little bit for you. So number 2, we have y equals -x plus 2. So in the instructions, it said make sure to identify slope and y-intercept. So that's what I want to take care of first. So I'm going to do that right underneath here. So my slope, remember, is the number in front of x. So here's an example of what I was talking about earlier. We don't technically see a number, but there is an understood 1 right there. So my slope looks like it's -1. Now, since we don't have a fraction, that means this is a whole number. Anytime you have a whole number, you can take that and put it over 1. So here's our rise over run fraction. So remember, if you do not see a fraction, that means it's a whole number, and you can put it over 1 to get your fraction. So there's my slope. So if I see this slope, I know I'm going to go down 1 because it's negative, and then to the right 1. So down 1, right 1. Okay? Then my b value, which is my y-intercept, is just this number back here. Make sure you grab that sign in front of it. So it's going to be a +2. And now I can just graph it. So I'm going to start, when I go to graph this, your y-intercept is always graphed first. So I'm going to take this 2, and I'm going to graph it on +2 on the y-axis. So make sure you're putting it on the y-axis right here. Then from this dot, so I'm going to keep my pencil on this dot, and I'm going to use my slope in order to get me more dots or more points. So from this point, I'm going to go down 1, right 1, and I'm going to plot another point. Down 1, right 1, plot another point. Down 1, right 1, plot another point. And you want to get enough points so that way when you use your straight edge to draw your line, it's easier for you. So I like to get 5 normally if I can. So then I'm just going to take this protractor right here with the straight edge, and I'm going to draw my line. Remember, don't just stop right here. We need to add arrows at the end to show that this is actually a line. Okay? So there's number 2. Be careful if you don't see technically a number in front of that x value. Okay, so let's take a look at number 4. Number 4 trips people up all the time. So again, we're going to identify slope and y-intercept before we graph anything. So let's take a look at our slope, which is our m value. The slope is the number in front of x. So there's my x. This is the number that we're talking about. So it's -2/3. This negative, a lot of people want to put it on both numbers, and we cannot put it with both numbers. You have to choose which number you want it to be with. It makes it easier on everybody if you choose the top. So take that negative and put it in the top with that 2. Because now, when I look at this, I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm going to go down to right 3, down to right 3. Because remember, it's rise over run. So always take your negative, put it with the numerator, the top number. And then my y-intercept is +2. And now I can start graphing. So now that I've identified these, let's start the graph. So your first point is going to be at +2. Oh, let me use my black pen. +2. And then from this point, I'm going to use my slope to get more. So from this point right here, I'm going to go down to right 3. Down to right 3. Well, I've run out of room on this side, so I'm going to go back to my original point, and I'm going to do the opposite. So I went down and right, so now I'm going to go up to left 3. Up to left 3. Well, there I've got my points. They're a little bit more spread out this time, which is fine. And I'm going to use my straight edge to draw my line. And then I'm going to add arrows at the end. And that's it. So it's super important that we label out what our slope and y-intercept is. The part that most people mess up on is the slope. So be very careful when you're naming what the slope is for 1 and 3. Okay? So I want you to take like a minute or two, and I want you to graph out 1 and 3 on your own. So I need you to pause this video, and then when you're done with it, push play, and I will show you what you should have graphed. So go ahead and do that for me now. Okay, as promised, here is number 1. So number 1 was pretty straightforward. We just had -1 as our y-intercept, and then my slope was 1/4, so that meant rise 1, right 4, up 1, right 4. And then number 3 looks like this. Y-intercept was at -3. And my slope, so check this out. Slope is -3, but I know since that's a whole number and I don't see a fraction, I can put that over 1. So when I plotted my y-intercept, I knew I needed to go down 3, right 1. Well, then I ran out of graphs, so then I did the opposite to get all these other points up here. So, pretty simple idea. You have to be very, very careful when you're talking about the slope right here. But those are pretty straightforward. So now, let's go over here and talk about how to graph something when it's not in slope-intercept form. So this one says when not given slope-intercept form. So when an equation is not in slope-intercept form, use inverse operations to convert the equation into slope-intercept form. So that statement right there means if it is not in slope-intercept form, just fix it. Use inverse operations to convert it to slope-intercept form. Not a big deal. Normally it takes 1 or 2 steps depending on how the equation looks, but it's super simple. So I'm going to do example 1 and 2 with you, and then I'll let you do example 3 on your own. So look at example 1. I know that this is not in slope-intercept form because, remember, slope-intercept form is that y equals mx plus b format. Well, this time we have x and y on this side. I need only y to be on this side. So I'm going to treat this just like any other equation, and I'm going to solve for that y. So I can't do anything with that -2y until I get rid of that 3x over there in the front. How you do that is inverse operations. So that's a positive 3x. So how I need to get rid of it is minus 3x. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. Well, when I subtract 3x from this side, those are going to go away. They disappear. That's what I wanted. So I'm going to bring down that negative 2y, and I'm going to bring down my equal sign. I didn't mess with either of those things, so I'm going to bring those down. Now, check this out. This is 10 minus 3x. I actually cannot combine these because that 10 does not have an x with it. These are not like terms. So I'm going to have to write both of them. But here's the thing. I want you to go ahead and put this x in the front. So I want negative 3x to be in the front and then that plus 10 to be at the back. Because, remember, this is what we're shooting for. That 10 represents your y-intercept because that's just the number by itself. So if we go ahead and put that x in the front, it saves us a step later on. So let's go ahead and just take that, put it in the front, and that's a positive 10, so I'm just going to put plus 10 right there at the back. Okay, now we're almost done because this y is already almost by itself. So now I need to get rid of that negative 2 out there in the front, so I'm going to divide by negative 2. Because remember, number sitting beside a letter, that's multiplication. Inverse is division. So when I divide by negative 2 on this side, I need to make sure I divide on that side. I write it like this because you need to divide every single thing by negative 2. Everything. So these negative 2's right here are going to go away, and we're going to be left with that 1y. And then we just need to simplify these fractions if we can. So the first thing I want you to do is look at this. Let's look at those two negatives. So when we have a negative divided by negative, that's going to be positive. Okay, got it, positive. Now, let's look at the number, 3 over 2. We need to check to see if that simplifies. It does not. And remember, do not change it to a decimal. So we're actually going to leave this as 3 over 2x. That one stays. The only thing that changed with that is those two negatives created a positive. Now let's take a look at this. 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. And here is my equation in slope-intercept form. So not terrible. This is as bad as they typically get. Just 2 steps, move the x, divide by whatever number's in front of the y, and then you're ready to go. So I'm going to quickly show you how to graph this again. Start with your y-intercept. So this is a negative 5, which means on my y-axis right here, I'm going to go down to negative 5, and I'm going to plot a dot. Then from this dot, I'm going to use my slope, which was the number in front of x, to determine how I move. Remember, it's always rise over run. So that means I'm going to go up 3, 2, 3, right 2. Up 3, right 2. Up 3, right 2. And I get quite a few dots if I can, just enough to make it easy for me to draw my line. So then I grab my straight edge, I draw my line, throw some arrows on it. And that's it. So I'm going to walk you through number 2, and then I'm going to let you do example 3 on your own. So check out example 2. So example 2 looks a little bit different, but it all still works the same. Our goal is to get it in y equals mx plus b form. So this y, my goal is to try to get it by itself on the left-hand side. So I can't do anything with that negative y yet. I have to move this 8x away from the y. I've got to get it on that other side. So that's a positive 8x. So I'm going to subtract 8x from both sides. Well, when I do that, these 8x's over here, they're going to go away, which is what I wanted. The whole goal was to get rid of them. Well, then I'm going to bring down that negative y because I didn't do anything with it. I'm going to bring down my equal sign because it always comes down. Now, I want to explain why I put this negative 8x or minus 8x underneath the 6x and not under the 3. You're trying to combine like terms all at the same time. So I wouldn't want to put it at the end back here because then I would have to combine like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So 6x minus 8x gives me negative 2x. Because 6 minus 8 is negative 2. And then I'm going to bring down that plus 3. Just like that. Well, now we're almost done. The only thing that we have to deal with now is this negative. So I want you to know that there is an understood 1 right there, and we need this 1 to be positive and not negative. So the only way to fix it is just to divide by a -1. When we divide by -1, all it's going to do is flip those signs. So this is going to be a positive y. So now, here we go. You have to be very, very careful on this part right here. We're looking at our slope, which is the number in front of x. Focus on the 2 negatives. 2 negatives make a positive, and 2 over 1 is 2. So now we're going to have positive 2x. Now we can do this one. 3 divided by -1 is just -3. And there you are. So again, just 2 quick steps to convert it. Now it's in slope-intercept form, and now I can actually graph it. So again, I'll walk you through this one. I'm going to walk you through how I do it. Pretty simple. Start at your y-intercept. So again, on the y-axis, this line right here, we're going to go down to -3. Put my dot. I normally don't even lift my pen or pencil, whatever I'm writing with, because then I take care of my slope. This slope, I want to make a little note, because this is a whole number, and anytime I see a whole number, if you don't see a fraction, it's a whole number, which means we can put it over 1. So if you have to write this out, then do so, okay? So from my y-intercept, which was the first point I plotted, I'm going to go up to right 1, up to right 1, up to right 1. And once I get enough points, I normally, again, shoot for 5. Once I get those, I just take my straight edge, and I draw me a line and throw some arrows on the end. And there you go. So just watch out for that whole number. If you see a whole number, just make it a fraction, put it over 1, and that'll help you graph the slope and get some more points. So now I want you, which I've already said it, I want you to do number 3. Example 3 actually is a 1-step equation to convert it. And how I know it's 1 step, this y is positive and it's already by itself. So once we move this 4x over here, we're done, and then we can automatically graph it. So I want you to pause this video, and then when you're done with example 3, push play again, and I'll have the correct answer here for you. Okay, here is example 3. So I subtracted 4x, moved it over there. 3x minus 4x gave me -1x, and then I just brought down the 5. So that actually converted it and fixed it for me. And so then I automatically went over here to start graphing. I did my y-intercept at +5, and then be very, very careful with the slope. A lot of kids mess this one up because you need to remember that this is an understood -1, so that's where I got that from, and that's a whole number, so I put it over 1, so that way when I went to move and get more points, I would know how to move, okay? So don't get tripped up on the slope. If you see a whole number, put it over 1. So just as a little recap for this one, we talked about slope last class. And then this one, we only focused on graphing. So we took slope-intercept form, the y equals mx plus b, graphed our y-intercept, and then used slope to come up with more points. Then we drew lines and added arrows to actually finish the graph, okay? Next class, we're going to talk about graphing 2 lines on the same graph. Good job today.